So we're going to work with a camera in Adobe Animate, and we're going to animate that camera. But not only that, we're going to see how we can manipulate our layers to work with our camera a little bit differently to make things look even more interesting and more real, and give it some really cool style to our animation. Let's take a look. Alright, so here's my scene. I built this in Illustrator. It's a combination of a couple images and some basic Illustrator shapes to create this scene. Nothing too crazy. I've got, as you can see here, a sky layer, and I added some mountains, and I'll turn those back on. We've got a moon right up here. It's just a shape. And then some haze. I added haze, which is just kind of like a gradient with a thin, just add a little style to it. I broke these three hills down into individual pieces to give it some more style. And then, of course, the ground that my person and dog are sitting on, along with that tree. And, of course, the boy and the dog. And I've laid it out so that I've got my foreground on top and my background down at the bottom. So I'm going to make this, I'm going to close this out for now, and I'm going to make this section, say, we're going to come out here to say 5 seconds long. Okay, so I'm going to unlock these. For some reason they're locked. There we go. And I'm going to press F5 on my keyboard, and I'm going to come down to the bottom, F5. I'm going to keep going down one, F5, 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 F5. And so on. So there we go. So there, everything is the same length. And now I'm going to come back to the beginning. And the first thing I'm going to do is add my camera. So I've got my layers in here. They're in my library. I brought them into my library here and created everything. And then I'm going to create a camera. And to create a camera is really easy. I'm just going to click on this Add Camera icon. And now you've got this little feature here, especially when your camera is selected here. Okay? And let me close that out. There we go. So now, you see if I hover over my image, I've got this pan. And you can see there's my edge of my composition from Illustrator. Let's kind of put that back in place. There's also a zoom. I can zoom in and zoom out. Obviously, I don't want to zoom all the way out like that. That's not what I would want. So just kind of bring it in there, and I'm going to pan it a little bit this way. And there we go. So I've got my keyframe. Just going to say insert keyframe. There we go. And let me just clear that keyframe. There. So there's my keyframe. Now I'm going to come out to the end. And maybe I'm just going to push in and pan up a little bit. Something like so. And I'm going to add a keyframe here. Insert keyframe. There we go. So 1, 2. There we go. 1, 2. And then all I have to do is grab these just by selecting my layer, right click and say Classic Tween. And there, if I play this, just hit enter on my keyboard and play this, you can see it kind of pulls in. But notice that everything is on the same layer, right? Everything is kind of moving at the same speed, and normally if this were real, that wouldn't be the case. The mountains wouldn't be getting as big as a tree. Like everything, there's a little bit of a depth. So we can add depth and dimension to our animations in a real easy step. So let me show you how that's done. So I'm going to create a new scene. So I'm going to come to my Scenes window, and let's go to Scenes. And there's Scene 1 with camera and with no camera. So here we were with no camera. Now I'm going to take this and just kind of delete that. Okay. And I'm going to create a new scene. And I'm going to say duplicate scene and use advanced layers. Yes. There we go. So here I have the same scene with that same camera, but this time we're going to do something a little differently. I'm going to select my camera, and I'm going to click this little, it looks like 2 arrows with almost like a graph with an arrow going up to the right. It's got 2 little lines with an arrow kind of going up to the right diagonally. and we get this window here called layer depth. Now layer depth works like this. I've got my camera selected, so here's my person with the camera, and this is your image plane for that camera. That's your depth of the camera. If I move it forward, I'm physically moving my camera forward and back. Okay, you see how that line kind of goes up and back. Well, now what I can do is a couple things. And now this button right here, maintain size, is very important, because a lot of times I'm going to want to make sure I maintain my size. Let's get this out of the way. Okay, so set this back to 0, and let's start working. Now obviously things, my boy and my dog, I definitely want to bring them closer. So I'm going to say bring them a little bit closer. I'm going to say minus 15. So they're a little bit closer to my camera. Same thing with the tree. Since the boy and the dog are under the tree, I'm going to go minus 50 with that tree. So maybe they're standing in front of the tree. Okay? You can see now that the red and all of that is kind of like taking shape. With the sky, let's maintain the size. And I'm going to push in a positive way the sky out, way out there, to say 871. That works good. 843, that's fine there. Okay? You can see how far it is away. Same thing with my mountain. I'm going to click on maintain size. And see how that's scaling out? So that's not quite right. Command Z. Click on maintain size. And I'm going to put it all the way out, almost as far as the sky, but not quite. The moon, same thing. That's pretty far out there, but the sky doesn't really move a whole lot. So I'm going to leave that there and zoom out further there. You see how it's zooming out with the size? We don't want that. Maintain size. Push it back like so. Maybe it's behind our mountains a little bit. There we go. So now you can see the moon is physically behind the mountain. So if I actually took this, if I grab my selection tool for a second, grab my moon here, not the haze. Let me lock the haze down. I could actually move it behind the mountains if I wanted to. Okay. Now the haze, that's fine. I'm going to leave that there. In fact, I'm going to lock the haze on with my camera because I don't really need that to move. And I could really do the same thing for the sky because that's not really moving anywhere either. So what I could do with that is I'm going to unlock it first. I'm going to click this little camera with the little link icon, this icon right here. I'm going to click that on my haze, just like so. And now that's kind of parented to the image plane of the camera, if you will. Because that's not going to change. That's always going to be right there on the image plane. Let's move on to Hill 3. I'm going to push that back. You can see haze is 0. Okay. Hill 3, I'm going to push that back. Oh, Command Z. Make sure we uncheck or check maintain size. I'm going to push that back a little bit. And then same thing with Hill 2. Maintain size. 380. Like that. And finally Hill 1. I'm going to bring Hill 2 back further. And same thing with Hill 3. Okay. And then, of course, the ground is at 0 and all of that. So we're looking good. So what did we just do? Now, if I grab my camera tool with my camera selected, now you see if I move around, things kind of jiggle or kind of, we've got a little bit of depth going on here. Now, when I created my layers, I didn't give enough room for my mountains and my hills, so I should probably go back and fix those in Illustrator and kind of redo that and think that through better. But that being said, I've got my motion here still. Look what happens when I play through. You can see that things start to separate a little bit, and I start to get a little bit more depth. If I push play, enter, I've got a little bit more depth happening, and it's much more realistic, more dynamic, and it's much more interesting to look at and watch as a viewer. So this is what we're doing. I want you to create a short animation, you're going to be using up to 8 layers. So 8 layers is what I'm asking for. Not 3. I'm looking for 8. So you've got here, which isn't that much if you think about it. You've got sky, which 1, ground is 2. I've got mountains 3, 3 hills, that's 6, right? And then I've got one subject matter here, which is the boy and the dog, and I've got a tree, so 2 other images. So that's 8. That's 8 right there, okay? And then I've got my moon. That's 9. So I actually have 9 images, okay? So that's our project. I hope this helps with you for your project as far as creating cameras. This is going to be important because we're going to use this in our larger project when we start duplicating scenes, creating multiple scenes for our longer animation for the end of the semester project. I'll see you in class.